The Complete Grimm's Fairy Tales. King Thrushbeard. A king had a daughter who was beautiful beyond all measure, but so proud and haughty withal that no single suitor was ever good enough for her. So she sent away one after the other and ridiculed them. Once the king made great feast, invited them from far and near, and all the young men likely to marry. They were all marshalled in a row according to their rank and standing. First came the kings, then grand dukes, then princes, earls, barons, and then the gentry. The king's daughter was led through the ranks, but each one she had some objection to make. One was too fat, that wine barrel, she said. Another was too tall, long and thin, has little in. The third too short, short and thick, is never quick. And the fourth was too pale as death. And the fifth too red, a fighting rooster. The sixth was not straight enough, a green log dried behind the stove. So she had something to say about each one, and she made herself especially merry over a good king who stood quite high up in the row and whose chin had grown a little crooked. Look, she cried and laughed, he has a chin like a thrush's beak. And from that time he got the name King Thrushbeard. But the old king, when he saw his daughter did nothing but mock the people and despaired that all the suitors were gathered, were going to be very angry and swore she should have for her husband the very first beggar that came to his door. A few days afterwards, a fiddler came and sang beneath the window, trying to earn a few pennies. When the king heard him, he said, "Let him come up." So the fiddler came in his dirty, ragged clothes, and sang before the king and his daughter. And when he ended, he asked for a trifling gift. And the king said, "Your song has pleased me so well that I will give you my daughter. There, she is to be your wife." The king's daughter shuddered, but the king said, "I have taken an oath to give you the very first beggar man, and I will keep it." All she could say was in vain. The priest was brought, and she had to let herself be wedded to the fiddler on the spot. When that was done, the king said, "Now it is not proper for you, a beggar woman, to stay in this palace any longer. You may just go away with your husband." The beggar man led her out by the hand, and she was obliged to walk away on foot with him. When they came to a large forest, she asked, "To whom does this beautiful forest belong?" "It belongs to King Thrushbeard. If you had taken him, it would have been yours. An unhappy girl that I am, but I have if I had taken but King Thrushbeard." Afterwards they came to a meadow, and she asked, "To whom does this beautiful green meadow belong?" "It belongs to King Thrushbeard. If you had taken him, it would have been yours. An unhappy girl that I am, if I had but taken King Thrushbeard." Then they came to a large town, and she asked, "To whom does this fine large town belong?" "It belongs to King Thrushbeard. If you had taken him, it would have been yours. An unhappy girl that I am, if I had but taken King Thrushbeard." "It does not please me," said the fiddler, "to hear you always wishing for another husband. Am I not good enough for you?" At last they came to a little hut, and she said, "Oh, goodness, what a small house! To whom does this miserable tiny hovel belong?" And the fiddler answered, "This is my house and yours, where we shall live together." She had to even stoop in order to enter through the low door. "Where are the servants?" said the king's daughters. "What servants?" answered the beggar man. "You must do for yourself what you wish to be done. Just make a fire at once, set water on to cook my supper, for I'm quite tired." But the king's daughter knew nothing about lighting fires or cooking, and the beggar man had to lend a hand himself to get anything fairly done. When they had finished their scanty meal, they went to bed, but he forced her to get up quite early in the morning in order to look after the house. A few days they lived in this way as well as might be, and came to an end of all their provisions. Then the man said, "Wife, we cannot go on any longer eating or drinking here and earning nothing. We must make baskets." And he went out and cut some willows and brought them home. Then she began to make baskets, but the tough willows wounded her delicate hands. "I will I see that this will not do," said the man. "You had better learn to spin, because perhaps you can be better." She sat down and tried to spin, but a hard thread cut her soft fingers, and so that the blood ran down. "Oh, see, you're not fit for any sort of work. I've made a bad bargain with you. Now I'll make a business with pots and earthenware, and you must sit in the marketplace and sell your wares." "Alas," thought she, "if any of the people from my father's kingdom come to the market and see me sitting there selling pots, how they will mock me." But it was of no use. She had to yield unless she chose to die of hunger. For the first time she succeeded well, for people were glad to buy the woman's wares because she was good looking, and they paid her what she asked. Many even gave her the money and left the pots with her as well. So they lived on what they earned so long as it lasted. Then the husband bought a lot of new crockery. And with this, she sat down in the corner of the marketplace and set about ready for sale. But suddenly there came a drunken man galloping along, and he rode right amongst the pots, so they were all broken into 1,000 bits. And she began to weep and did not know what to say to do for fear. Alas, what will happen to me? What will my husband say to this? And she ran home and told him of his misfortune. Who would seat herself at a corner of the marketplace with crockery? Said the man. Leave off crying. I see very well that if you cannot do any ordinary work. So I have been to our king's palace and have asked whether they cannot find in place for you a kitchen maid, and they have promised me to take you. In that way you will get your food for nothing. And the king's daughter was now a kitchen maid and had to be at the cook's beck and call and do the dirtiest work. In both her pockets she fastened a little jar, in which she took home to share of their leavings upon which they lived. It happened that the wedding of the king's eldest son was to be celebrated, so the poor woman went up and placed herself by the door to look on. When all the candles were lit and the people, each more beautiful than the other, entered, all was full of pomp and splendor, and she thought a lot with a sad heart, and cursed her pride and haughtiness, which had humbled her and brought her to such great poverty. The smell of the delicious dishes which were being taken in and out reached her, and now and then servants threw a few morsels at them, but she put in her jars to take home. All at once the king's son entered, clothed in velvet and silk, with gold chains around his neck. And when he saw the beautiful woman standing in the door, he seized her by the hand and would have danced with her. But she refused and shrank for fear, for she saw it was King Thrushbeard, her suitor she had driven away with scorn. Her struggles were to no avail, and he drew her into the hall. But the string by which her pockets were hung broke, and the pots fell, and soup ran out, and scraps were scattered all about. And when people saw it, there arose general laughter and derision, and she was so ashamed that she would rather have been 1,000 fathoms below the ground. She sprang to the door and would have run away, but the stairs and caught the man and brought her back. And when she looked at him, it was King Thrushbeard again. He was so kindly, and said to her, "Don't be afraid. I am the fiddler who have been living with you in that I am the fiddler who have been living with you in that wretched hovel are one. So for the love of you I have disguised myself so, and also as the man who rode through and broke your crockery. This was all done to humble your proud spirit and punish you for such insolence when you mocked me." When she wept bitterly, she said, "I have done a great wrong, and I am not worthy to be your wife." But he said, "Be comforted. The evil days are past. Now we will celebrate our wedding." Then the maids in waiting came and put her in the most splendid clothing, and her father and the whole court came and wished her happiness in her marriage with King Thrushbeard. And the joy now began in earnest, and I wish you and I had been there.